Welcome to the Elevate Your Leadership podcast series with U.S. Navy Special Operations veteran, CEO, and hockey fanatic Bob Pizzini. Bob discusses leadership, success, failure, defining moments, and hard lessons learned with guests who are intentional in their approach to leadership. Leadership is a perishable skill. Use it or lose it. In this series, entrepreneurs, industry executives, academics, public figures, and other highly effective professionals share their formulas for success with you.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Elevate Your Leadership podcast. If you've listened to the show before, you know that I have people on who not only bring great value to me and my organization, but these are people who I know will bring great value to you and your organization just by simply listening to this discussion. Previous guests include Congressman Ronnie Jackson out of Texas, former Governor Bob McDonnell. Today's guest, super special guest, 2nd Congressional District of Virginia, Congresswoman Jen Kiggans. Jen, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bob, for having me today.
Yeah, it's awesome. I know you're in the middle of a campaign season and you're trying to help manage a country, and you got a lot going on, so I really appreciate you making the time for this. And to the listeners, I usually read my guest's bio because we really like to get to know how people came to be who they are. And this is Jen's 2nd appearance on the Elevate Your Leadership podcast, so refer to the previous episode, and you can learn all about her upbringing. Her first job, if I recall correctly, was Disney World.
That's right, in
So
Orlando.
if you want to get to know Jen Kiggans throughout her life, refer back to that previous episode, and that was 2022, I think August of 2022, if I'm not mistaken. So with that, you've had a busy couple of years.
That's right.
And I'd like to begin the discussion by saying, how's it going? What's it like to, is being a U.S. Congresswoman what you thought it would be, or how's it going?
Yeah, I mean, it's going well. There's a lot of work to do, and I kind of wish we were back up in Washington right now. We're home for an August recess period, and we go back in September for 3 weeks. We have several more appropriations bills to pass. We've passed about 6 out of 12, so we still have some work to do to get the budget in place, and it's a budget that we do every year. So, and it's very time-consuming, and I am not a fan of things like shutting down the government. I don't like continuing resolutions. I wish that we were back up there working out all our priority differences so that we could get a budget passed, so that people like our defense industry, knew what they had coming down the pipe so that they could plan ahead. We hear a lot of times how it impacts not just defense and the agriculture industry. There's so many different people that rely on government funding, and when we can't let them predict how much money is coming their way, then it really stifles their ability to plan ahead and to just keep their workforce that they need and that type of stuff. So I wish we were back in D.C. We've got our work cut out for us in September, and then this is an election year, so we are home in October, and we have the election coming up November 5th. But how has it been? Gosh, is it everything I was hoping for? I love it. I love my job. It's truly a privilege and an honor to have a seat in government in Washington. I never take that lightly. Many days I leave in the evenings and it's nighttime and the Capitol glows and it's just beautiful and historic and a true privilege. It's a little chaotic some days. I think, the general public sees that. You see what's happening on TV. And
yeah, the news makes sure that we see the
they
chaos.
make sure you see all the bad parts. There's a lot of good parts you don't see too. But, we have a very slim House majority on the Republican side right now. We have flipped control in 22. So we have a whopping 3 seats, 3 more votes than the Democrats do. It's a split Congress, so we have a Republican House and a Democrat Senate and then a Democrat in the White House. So it's difficult and challenging environment to get a lot of things done. We have managed to pass bills and especially a lot of good bills out of the House. And that for me as a conservative, I think are the right direction for the country. Unfortunately, we have a Senate that refuses to take up a lot of our House bills, including things like border bills, deregulation, restoring American energy independence, things that we know are Americans care about and that are helpful for our country. And it's frustrating that the Senate refuses to take up those bills. So progress is slow. I wish it was a little faster. There are many days I wish it was a little less chaotic. Even on our side, our roughly 223 members, it's hard sometimes to get us all on the same page. But I think that, the more we can elect common sense voices to the table who can listen to each other and who can compromise and always put the country first, not their individual priorities, I think that will go a long way. So this November is an opportunity to hopefully get some new members of Congress so we can just continue to prioritize what's best for the country and get things done.
Wow. So many places to go just based on that response. Let's start with the border and the border bill. Now, again, depending on what news station you watch, there was this perfect border bill that was bipartisan, and then, it was clear President Trump was going to be the nominee, and he came in and killed it. Is that true? And where were you on that border bill? And what is the solution going forward?
Yeah, the border issue is frustrating because that was one of the first votes I took when I showed up as a new member of the House. And we passed H.R. 2, which was the strongest and best border bill we've ever passed in the history of our Congress. And we did that because the border's been wide open, and we've seen over close to 12 million illegal immigrants come across. And in addition to that, people that want to do harm to our country. And we see increased cartel activity and even locally issues with our base security and whatnot. And we know that every state has become a border state, and it's no one will deny that between the fentanyl crisis to human trafficking crisis to just the increase in violent crimes and cartel activity, it's increased everywhere. So no one is denying, at least on our side, that the border is wide open and is a problem. We passed that bill, and I want people to think back too when Joe Biden first took office, and by executive order, he stopped building Donald Trump's wall. And when I went to Arizona and saw an incomplete wall, and we saw wires hanging off of street lamp poles where they were supposed to have lights and cameras, and the Border Patrol would tell us everything is stored in a warehouse. And, oh, by the way, the taxpayers are paying to store the parts of the wall and the lights and the cameras that the president, via executive action, stopped all that progress. And when you talk about the other border bill, that because the Senate never took up H.R. 2, we passed it out of the House, and it just sat, and the Senate continues to sit there. When the Democrats brought a much weaker version of a border bill and then kick and scream because we wouldn't pass their by the way, much weaker version, you could literally change so many things by just executive action, and you haven't done that. They could restart building the border wall, make sure we're supporting our Border Patrol. There was funding for technology, keeping Remain in Mexico policies. There was a lot of good things in H.R. 2. The watered down version was not going to be helpful. It was not something that I would support. I wanted the strongest, most loudest message we could send, because when you talk to Border Patrol about why the increase in activity, they say, they know the cartels are smart down there. They know that there's no repercussions for them to traffic people across the border and charge people thousands of dollars. And they see them decked out in head-to-toe camouflage. They put carpets under their shoes so they can't track them. They're using night vision goggles. I mean, they don't have to pay any taxes or any bills, right, on their side. So I want the strongest possible measures that I can put in place. And for the administration to say that their option was the best, they literally could fix the problem overnight via executive action, and they haven't done it. So that needs to be remembered. Oh, by the way, we have a vice president who is now the Democrat presidential candidate who was given that job, who never went to the border.
Right. Border czar never went to the border. Yeah.
So people need to remember those types of things.
There's something in military speak or military intelligence called ground truth. And you just described the ground truth on the border. And as leaders, if you don't go and speak to your frontline people and see the ground truth firsthand, you will never respond accordingly. It's, I run a business with 40 people. The ground truth, what I need to know, comes from my frontline customer-facing people, whether I like it or not. And in the business world, I've got to listen to them and pay attention to them in order for this business to thrive. And unfortunately, government, and when you have leaders in government who have never had that sense of ownership or that true ownership or responsibility, I think it's problematic.
And actions speak louder than words. So, watch what they may say all these things. And even now, I've got Harris saying that she wants to build a wall. Well, you could have already built the wall. You've been there for 4 years, but you've never been down there, and you've made no movement. So, they'll say anything to get elected. So, So, actions speak louder.
Well, let's touch on Harris real quick, because it's just this has never occurred in our history that I'm aware of, where somebody is the Democratic nominee or a Republican nominee, but in this case, the Democratic nominee, who has not been selected through a primary process, right? The electorate did not select her. The Democratic Party did. Has that ever happened in history? And what are your thoughts on it?
I don't think it has ever happened in history, and it was shocking to watch. We saw Joe Biden for quite a while, several years. I'm a geriatric nurse practitioner, so to watch him cognitively decline, through multiple press conferences and just events, and then
the short stares on the airplane,
all those things. But the debate with Donald Trump, I think, was kind of the final straw. The media couldn't cover for him anymore.
Right.
The American people saw that. So you can only lie so much before people are seeing with their own eyes. And so the Democrats realized that too, and they realized that their candidate, who they had won in a primary election season, could not win, was not going to win, was going to further decline. Cognitive impairment doesn't get better; it generally gets worse. And so they decided single-handedly. I think Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer had a lot to do with it, but they would just simply replace their candidate and pick one that they thought could win and could be Donald Trump. And to see that happen overnight, and they like to talk about threats to democracy, and they run all these campaigns about threats to democracy. Well, that is a huge threat to democracy.
Huge.
And you literally just overrid 14 million voters and decided you were going to handpick your candidate, and then you were going to not talk about policy and use a lot of smoke and mirrors and run a basement campaign similar to what you did last time, and never talk about your true agenda. That is scary that they could do this, and even what's going on with some of the ballots with now that RFK is backed out of the out of the campaign and wanting to keep his name in some of the tougher states. So, it's shocking to watch. I don't know, what we can do going forward to prevent that, but it was certainly wrong, and I think that certainly is a threat to democracy. So
you would think the nominee would have to have been selected through an election process. I mean, it's the basic foundation of our democracy.
Right.
Yeah, it's really shocking. And you're right. That is the true threat to democracy. And you can rewind and look at what just happened with Mark Zuckerberg. He revealed that he did in fact suppress and manipulate data at the request of the administration. Hunter Biden's laptop, for example. In addition to Zuckerberg suppressing and manipulating that information, 50 supposed intelligence officials of the United States signed a document saying that the Hunter laptop story is a Russian hoax. This is right out of Putin's playbook. This is Soviet-era tradecraft, if you will. It's really shocking. But
if there's one thing I've learned in my short career in politics is how sided the media is. And the fact that we had Mark Zuckerberg coming and very publicly saying that they had influenced him to only talk about positive certain things and not other things. And I know for a fact, and you watch, I'm in the room for when the news is made a lot of times. And I come home and I turn on the television, and very inaccurate what they're reporting, right. And the people that they'll highlight. There's a lot of good people doing a lot of good work, but you'll highlight literally the top few crazy, chaotic people that are out there. That
sure.
So very inaccurate. Even now. I mean, ask Harris the hard questions. You need to ask her policy questions. This is not stop nitpicking on people's personalities. Let's talk about and compare policy issues. And it's very frustrating because the media is very sided.
Yeah, and last night, Vice President Harris and Governor Walz were on a CNN interview. And what were your thoughts on that? Did you see it? Did you hear the clips?
Same thing. No. I caught a majority of it. We were traveling yesterday, but very little policy discussion. And it was interesting because a week or so prior, she had come out and said, her first policy position that they were going to give $25,000 to first-time home buyers.
That's
and
me and you doing the giving, by the way.
Price controls, and grocery stores.
Yeah.
And so that was wildly unpopular. And people needed to know because this is the type of agenda. And I think somebody sat her down and was like, "Hey, stop talking about your policy positions, your agenda. Go back to meaningless rhetoric and talking about joy and all the other things that we at the Smoke and Mirrors campaign were running on." But we really need to, and it's easy this time because we have 4 years that we can look at. So you showed us already for 4 years. I need the American people to know that they've already been in she's already been in the job.
Right.
So nothing will change at all. And
it'll continue to decline.
They won't say anything to get elected. So
Yeah.
we are now in a phase where I just need the American people to critically think. I know you can all do it, put your thinking caps on out there, but that's think about advertising when you were taught in junior high, about how companies are trying to sell you products. This is the same type of thing.
Exactly what it is.
I've got a party trying to sell you a product, and they'll say anything to sell you that product.
Yeah.
They'll say anything to get elected. And then once they're in control, we know the playbook because we've seen it for 4 years.
Yeah.
The playbook will not change.
She speaks in these platitudes as well, which drives me nuts. I mean, it's typical political speak, if you will, politician speak. But she says, we need to end the war between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and we need to bring peace to the region. Well, no kidding. That everybody knows that.
Right.
How are you going to do it? What is your plan? What's the support for the, and so hitting these wave tops and these platitudes, I mean, anybody can shake their head north and south and go, yes, I agree with that.
Yeah.
But
we need a ceasefire agreement. We need to return the hostages. I think there's that's pretty unified. Desire, but she didn't tell us how we're going to do that, and they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth, and that's frustrating. And I was in the room when we had Prime Minister Netanyahu come to do a joint address of Congress, and there was 125 Democrats that did not show up for that joint session, including the Vice President who sits next to the Speaker of the House during our joint sessions. Her chair was filled by a different senator, and not only were there so much space on that side of the room, we had to put our Republican staffers over there because the Democrats would sit and Netanyahu gave a great, very powerful, very patriotic, very pro-alliance, speech, and we clapped and cheered and were very supportive on the Republican side, and the Democrats sat. And I could see Mark Warner from my seat, and I could see a lot of the other Democrats, and they would sit and they would not clap.
That is unbelievable.
And it was a stark difference. And people need to know that.
Yeah.
It's hard, and again, the media is focused on the speakers, and they're not showing the audience in the room. But I was there, and it's 125 members is over half of their conference.
I guarantee you Netanyahu noticed that,
Yes, and it was funny. A lot of his speech was directed to the right side of the room, which was very engaged in what he was saying, and then the left side was a stark difference.
Wow. Just one of the things you said last week or a couple of weeks ago is that the commercials would be coming out soon from your opponent, and the commercials were just going to tell lies about you. And honestly, the day you said that or the day after, boom, there was the commercial, and it's such classic kind of bait and switch. I'm not sure what the exact terminology is, but they took a quote of you. You saying we all want to work together, or whatever the quote was, right? We all stand together. Who knows what you were talking about, because that's the only thing. And then they started talking about abortion, and they tied in Marjorie Green Taylor at Marjorie Green. And so this trickery in marketing and advertising, it's so over the top. It's how do people not notice that? And I remember during your last election, they were doing that. And I asked you, I was like,
they did every election.
Can we sue them? I mean, what's going on?
You mentioned how I was all in gray and had lightning coming out of my head, I think, at one point. But it's the American people hate that. I hated it when I was just.
And you're not running attack ads or negative.
We have not run a single attack ad, or we run a very positive campaign. I want people to know what I stand for, what my priorities are, what I bring to the table. But it's all they have. So they will not talk about what they bring to the table. They will just simply run very negative, nasty attack ads with terrible pictures with lightning coming out of my head. But people don't like that. And I think it turns people off. It turned me off. Or I guess maybe it turned me on enough that I wanted to get involved in the political arena because I hated what I saw on TV. And I think there's a better way that you can do politics. But they take everything out of context, and it's been about lies since day one, and they've been running attack ads since we won the election.
That's true.
Several ads about me wanting to take away veteran health care, which as a veteran and daughter of a veteran, spouse of a veteran, mom to future veterans, as a healthcare provider, this makes zero sense. And I think that a lot of people see through that. So I just need people to critically watch. They're trying to sell something with smoke and mirrors, and I don't think they'll be successful.
Hopefully not, because it's just dishonesty. If they're dishonest, going into the campaign process and the election process, then that dishonesty carries on into their administration.
Right.
I mean, if you're dishonest now, what's to say you're not going to be dishonest later? And so I love the fact that you're running a positive campaign, and here's the accomplishments, and here's some of the issues we face. Speaking of the issues we face, what are you trying to tackle for the 2nd District here?
Yeah, I mean, above all else, and right now since we're on TV, I'm very recognizable in places like the grocery store parking lot and everywhere we go around town. And so I love when people come up to me and want to talk about policy and the things that they care about. And I'd say number one, across my district is always the economy, just how much money people have in their bank accounts. And that's another place where they can't lie to people that live here, and to my voters. They may say that Bidenomics is the next best thing since sliced bread and how great the economy is, but people see in their pocketbooks, and their bank statements don't lie to them. So they know that they are not only paying more, but they are carrying more credit card debt. They are having trouble getting things like home loans and auto loans, and that it costs them over $40 to go to the drive-through to get hamburgers and for their kids. So and twice as much when you're checking out the grocery lane. So those things don't lie, and they know that, and there's a reason why. And you look at the history, when the Democrats had the supermajority, they had the House, they had the Senate, they had the Democrat in the White House, the amount of money that was spent on a daily basis, it's like they thought it grew on trees. I've never heard a Democrat ask the question, how much does that cost? They don't understand the concept, and it's shocking. So, and because of that, the billions of dollars that they spent on all kinds of, the Build Back Better, the Inflation Reduction, which was not inflation reduction, it was an increase, but that has led, and a lot of just the over-regulations of our businesses, especially our energy industry. I mean, all these things compiled have inflation through the roof right now. People are still struggling. People are behind in their loan payments. So I need people to remember there's a reason for those things, and that was another one of the first things we did when we came in to the majority, was to try to put some spending caps and to really look at where we're prioritizing spending. We've got to change some things. We can't continue to spend ourselves into oblivion. This is debt that our kids will be paying off, and the world is watching as well. So we can do better as a country with responsible spending and prioritizing where those spending needs are. But I'd say the economy is first and foremost. The border we touched on a little bit. It's impacting everyone. We sat down with the Virginia Department of Homeland Security secretary who explained to me about he's worried about law enforcement, safety, and security because of the increased cartel activity. We're really worried about base security. We've seen everything from drones to people just plowing right through the front gates who want in our bases, who are bad actors. So that's certainly an issue. And for my district specifically, we have a very large military presence here. We have a lot of Navy bases. We have the East Coast Master Jet Base, Naval Station Norfolk. A lot of our SEAL teams are here, and we know what's going on
and our EOD teams.
And EOD teams, a lot of our military. So we know what's going on in the world, and that it's not a safe place right now. And we look at when Russia invaded Ukraine and what happened in Israel on October 7th, and then the increased Chinese aggression in the South China Sea, and that's a direct result of just poor and weak leadership coming out of the White House. So that weak leadership has endangered the people that live in my district. Not just, this is my family who serves. These are my friends who serve, so many people who I represent. So I worry about our standing on the world stage, our national security, our foreign policy. What message are we sending to our adversaries out there? I'm a big believer in peace through strength, and I want to continue to be that deterrent. But that means that we put our money where our mouth is, and we prioritize that defense budget, and we send that signal to the world. And the weak leadership from the White House has made our world much less safe. So those are the issues. I'd say, the economy, border, and our standing on the world stage. But that security, that kind of lack of security also translates into our communities. I mean, the law enforcement piece as well. We've seen, and I check in with them very frequently. I know Suffolk, we were with them for National Night Out. They're down about 50 officers. Chesapeake's down to about 20. But they're still
down about 80, I believe, in Virginia Beach.
Retention, issues, and that's a result of again, Democrat policies. But from defund the police to just how they've been treated under Democratic administrations. So there's a lot of work to do.
There is, for sure. Folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. I'm a capitalist. Jen supports a capitalist form of government, and we will be right back. I want to take a minute to tell you about my book titled Elevate Your Leadership: How to Develop, Maintain, and Advance Lifelong Leadership. This book is based on my 26 years in U.S. Navy Special Operations and now 13 years in the private sector. Leadership is a perishable skill and a personal brand. In part 1, I guide you through building and applying your personal brand of leadership. Leadership also requires physical energy and mental clarity. In part 2, I go over the 6 key components of health and wellness and how you can apply these components every single day to become a great leader. This book is also breathable. What does that mean? It's 170 pages, 12-point font, with charts and graphs and pictures to break up the monotony of reading page after page. Finally, this book is available on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and of course, RobertPizzini.com. Folks, I want to take a minute and talk about Breeden Construction. Breeden Construction built iFly Virginia Beach 10 years ago, and our building is solid. Why? Building a standard. Our standard is excellence. Visionary thinking, innovative design, dynamic solutions, and transformative growth. While others may see lofty ideals, we see the very foundation needed to construct a better future. This isn't just a promise we make to you, it's the standard we uphold. This is Breeden Construction. Learn more at breedenconstruction.com. Headquartered in Virginia with offices throughout Virginia and North Carolina, you can contact Breeden Construction directly at area code 804-364-4600. Breeden Construction, a national general contractor. And we are back. We are talking to Congresswoman Jen Kiggans, representative of the 2nd Congressional District in the state of Virginia, a veteran herself, a former Navy helicopter pilot. Her husband is a former Navy fighter pilot, and her kids are serving our military in various capacities. We left off, we were talking about the economy. Of course, we're talking about the border economy, U.S. national security, which is really U.S. foreign policy, diplomacy, information exchange, military readiness and strength, and economy, DIME, right? The 4 instruments of power for the U.S. But I want to break it down to economy, because what you just talked about, I'm going to give you a first-person testimonial. And please take this message with you as my representative. iFly Virginia Beach is in its 10th operating year. This is the lowest grossing year we've had in 10 years. It should be our highest grossing year in 10 years. And it's our lowest grossing year. And my insurance, and here's why. Because we have less people walking through the door. Why is that? Because at the end of the day, we are an amusement or a recreational activity. And when people don't have disposable income, that's the first thing that goes away. They've got to eat. They've got to have a roof over their head. So the struggling economy is just so crystal clear, not only from me as a business owner at the Virginia Beach oceanfront, but when I talk to people in the restaurant association, the hotel association, we're all feeling the same pain, if you will. So people don't have disposable income. At the same time, my costs are going up in a way that I want to complain to my congresswoman about. And I'll give you an example. I have about 6 or 7 insurance policies, wind and hail, slip and fall, all these, to run a business. Most of those policies have doubled in the last 2 years. I haven't filed a single claim. And most of my insurance policies have gone up significantly. And check your car insurance, because automobile insurance has gone up significantly without people filing a claim. So, I think that's I hate to use the word price gouging, but I think that's more like legalized extortion. But your point on the economy is well taken, because I'm feeling it right. I'm feeling it in my business, and I'm feeling it in my personal life as well.
I remember I knocked on a person's door, and their small business that they owned was for birthday parties. And they traveled around and set up different, it was like a video game thing. And they were almost in tears telling me how they were considering closing their business because birthday parties are another thing that goes. You talk about
that's right,
what people can spend money on, and they're not going to do.
It's one of our revenue streams that we're losing.
Birthday parties too. Yeah, I hear it all over.
Yeah. So border economy, national defense, national security. I know you are on the let's go back. You talked earlier about the bill that you're working on. You started the discussion, and part of that is the NDAA. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so that's the National Defense Authorization Act. Yeah. So the NDAA is the military's budget, if you will, for the next fiscal year. And I remember throughout my entire career, there was always a continuing resolution. And I remember a couple times, and this was when I was a junior enlisted person and I didn't understand all the nuance of the NDAA, but we were told that we might not get paid on the upcoming payday. Now, that's never happened in my career, and it's not happened that I'm aware of, but that keeps sailors up at night. And so working on that bill is critical. But where I'm going with this is that's also an indication to our enemies that we have a system that they can take advantage of if they want.
And so that was a bill whenever we do talk about the government shutting down, and I'm vehemently against that, but we put a piece of legislation in place called the Pay Our Troops Act, which would prevent them from stopping payment to our military men and women. We included the Coast Guard this time. We made sure, because we saw last time that did happen several years ago, the Coast Guard was left out of pay protection. So that bill was in place. That bill was ready to roll last September, October, when we were initially talking about shutting the government down. I think it's the worst case scenario. So much of our just local businesses rely on federal funding here, and our contractors and whatnot. So we need to work to never shut the government down. But I did personally sponsor the Pay Our Troops Act, which would have protected military pay and including Coast Guard pay. So I don't want people to stay up at night worried about that. When you talk about the National Defense Authorization Act, that's a product that comes out of the Armed Services Committee, which I have the privilege of sitting on. And 52 members. It's actually a fairly bipartisan committee. We agree on a lot of things. We agree. It was almost a unanimous vote for the NDA. There was only one dissenting vote, so that was pretty good to come out of that. But one of the things I'm proudest of that we did get into the NDA this year were 51 amendments to the tune of, 31 amendments to the tune of $5 billion for quality of life initiatives for our active duty members. And I sat on a bipartisan commission for 9 months. That was the Recruitment, Retention, Quality of Life Task Force. That this was the first time that the U.S. House had ever put together a task force like that. But we met with all types of advocacy groups and family groups and veteran groups, and leadership, military leadership, and asked, especially on the enlisted side, what do you all need? We know that we are challenged by just our declining recruitment retention numbers. It's all volunteer force. I want to keep good people. I want to attract and keep good people, and there's a lot of competition for jobs out there. So we looked at a lot of things, but we came up with 5 things as a result of these 9 months. The number one thing we were focused on was pay and compensation. We know that, especially for E1 through E4, just not competitive out there. So we put in a 15% pay raise for that very junior enlisted group of people, in addition to a 5.2% pay raise that we had given them, which had been the largest in 20 years. But that 15% pay raise, and oh, by the way, the White House had come out and said we don't support this 15% pay raise when our bipartisan task force out of the House said this is what we need to recruit and retain sailors. Yeah. And it was across all service branches. But pay and compensation was number one. Housing was number two. We know that we don't have enough housing, especially in this area, unaccompanied housing specifically. We've seen scathing reports come out of Washington that looked at some of the mold pest safety issues that come out of housing.
Oceana.
Towards so much housing. Oceana has less than 50% available on unaccompanied housing. And even family housing has come a long way. I actually am a fan of the privatized model that we've done with family housing. We have one privatized unaccompanied housing in Norfolk, one in San Diego. We need more of that, where we have an outside group come in, build the housing, manage the housing, and the BAH goes then to that group. I want to take some things off the DoD budget's plate, and privatization is one way to do that. So, for sure. So that was a recommendation that we expand that privatized housing. Healthcare was another place that we focused on making TRICARE. There's a lot of room for TRICARE improvements. I'm a TRICARE family still.
So are we.
I'm sure you are too. So, and we could sit here all day and talk about stories.
I'm actually pretty happy. And the VA.
Okay.
And I know you've been very active with our local VA hospital, making improvements up there. But I have to tell you, as somebody who's used it for 14 years. I've
Well, I like to hear success stories
Yeah.
because we hear a lot of complaints.
Yeah.
But healthcare is always, especially for me in the mental health side, we've done a lot of work with in that space. And then it was spouse employment. We looked at spouse employment issues as well because we know these families move every 2 to 3 years, and spouses are challenged by crossing different states and their certification, people like nurses and teachers. How are we letting spouses know what types of jobs are available to them, either on base and or off base? And then childcare was the last thing we looked at. The wait for the CDC at Oceana is over 1,000 children long. We don't have enough childcare resources on base, but we've got a lot of dual military families. So we put some changes in place to pay our providers better, to allow them to bring their first child to work with them. So we wanted to make it more attractive because we're short on providers and there's a lot of competition for those jobs. And then some funding to actually build more child development centers. So paying compensation, housing, healthcare, childcare, and spouse employment were really the top priorities that we put into this year's NDAA, and that passed out of the House. Still waiting for the Senate and conference version. So the final version has not been passed yet, but those were our House recommendations.
Okay. I know the clock's ticking and you've got to move on to other things. I'm going to ask you maybe just one or two or three more questions if we can get through them. The first one is, I'm going to go back to politics real quick. Tim Walz and his military, all the controversy over what he said and what his service consisted of. Do you have any observations or thoughts there?
I just know that there's been a lot of inconsistencies, and even when he talked about it at the interview they did last night, he really skipped over it and did not answer the questions. So, don't lie about your military service.
Yeah, especially being in a war zone.
I don't want to attack you on your military, but don't lie about it.
Yeah.
So I think it, just tell us the truth about it.
Yeah.
So I think that's created a lot of just speculation and a lot of distrust.
Yeah, for sure.
Voters.
As somebody who served for 26 years and served in the war zone in Iraq, alongside a 21-year-old, female from Baltimore, for example, people who have been there and done that, it's serious business, and it's certainly nothing to glorify. There's no glory in what happens in actual warfare, and so I applaud his service overall. But to embellish it all about being in a war zone is terrible. And you and I have both lost friends in the war zone, and if they didn't lose their life in the war zone, I have a couple of friends who lost their soul in the war zone, and when they came back to the U.S., they wound up taking their own life. So there's that whole other aspect of it. So. But I think he just needs to really set the record straight on that one.
Right. He did it last night. They gave him an opportunity, and he glossed right over
Exactly.
that. So that just created more distrust in my mind.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay, and then kind of a general overall question, but this is the question I've wanted to ask you more than anything else. Political leadership versus all the other forms of leadership that you've experienced. And I know you led and that you were in the Senate, the Virginia State Senate as well, so you've got political leadership experience on the state and national level, and then everything you did before you entered politics. So how is political leadership different than the private sector, than somebody running a business?
Yeah, I think it's a lot more in the public light, and I think it's more important than ever to make sure we're leading by example. I think that there's room for improvement. There's a lot of good people in Washington, but there's a lot of people that I have a lot of questions about. So, people are watching, and especially right now, politics is so divisive. And when we live with divisive politics, it's not helpful for the country. I think it really impacts our pride and patriotism, and we should be united. We live in the best country in the world. We need to be proud of that, and we need to fight for that. And I get very frustrated when I see division that's created. And I think we should be focused on what unifies us and not so much what divides us. And I think a lot of that is leadership driven. So I can't control the presidential election and all the other elections going. I can control how I lead, and I try every day to lead by a good example. I don't agree with everyone that I work with, but I certainly know how to be professional and respectful, because that's what I learned in the military. That's what I learned as a nurse and listening to a lot of patients and families, and as a mom of 4. So I think there needs to be more of that. I think we can disagree without being disagreeable.
For sure.
And people are watching. Children are watching. And the future of our country is watching. I can't tell you how many times I get approached by young kids who have seen my ads and they'll want to. And so you talk about negative ads and whatnot. I mean, kids watch TV, so be careful what we're saying on TV. So
For sure.
So I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I try to do my part and lead by a good example that prioritizes the country, prioritizes pride and patriotism, because we certainly need to get back to that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Jen, last question, I promise. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you would like to discuss? Or have I done such an awesome, fantastic job?
You have. You've done a really good job. I think we covered a lot of ground. But I would say that, we have, I believe, 67 more days until the election this year. It's November 5th. And I know people always, especially politicians, love to say this is the most important election of your lifetime. Every time, right? But every election is very important. But this one really, it's important. And I need people to vote, right? And to vote every time. But we have a lot of opportunity for change right now. And we've been living in a country for 4 years, which I want people to look at things that tell them the truth, things like their bank accounts, things like what's happening on the world stage, things like the safety and security in their community, things that they know personally, and ask themselves, are they better or worse than they were 4 years ago under this type of leadership, this administration? And you have the opportunity to change that in November. And that's a powerful choice and a powerful thing that we get to vote every year in Virginia. We have elections.
Yeah, right.
But please vote this time. Do your homework, critically think. I know the American people are smart and can make good decisions, but go out there, make a good decision. Make sure your friends and family vote. We need everybody to be turning out this November because there's a lot at stake.
Congresswoman Jen Kiggans, thank you so much for coming on the Elevate Your Leadership podcast.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
Thank you for listening to the Elevate Your Leadership podcast. To contact Bob directly or to learn more about how Bob can advance you and your organization through leadership training, team building, executive coaching, and public speaking, visit robertpizzini.com. Robert, Pizzini.com, and connect with him on LinkedIn.